Welcome to video 12.2. Today we're going to be talking about creating statistical diagrams. So specifically we're going to first start talking about how to create a box plot. The first thing that you need to do is get the 5-number statistical summary for the diagram using your calculator. And those 5 numbers are your minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and your maximum. So how do we use the calculator to get those 5 numbers? You need to start by going to Stat and then over to Edit like we've done in the past. You will input the data into the list L1. If the data has a frequency list, that needs to go into L2. Then you'll go back to Stat, over to Calculate, and go to 1var stats. In this menu, you need to correctly identify the list used and then hit Calculate. If you have the older calculator, you will see on the home screen 1var stats L1, L2, and we'll talk more about what you need to put in when using a frequency list. Step 2 is making the box plot. So how do we make a box plot? First, you're going to need to write down the 5-number statistical summary and label each piece of information. Then you'll need to have a number line, and you're going to plot those values above the number line. Then the middle 3 plots we'll be creating the rectangle, which we will separate into 2 smaller rectangles, and then the minimum and maximum are attached to the box so they look like a whisker, so that they have the line just connecting to them. And you must have a title and label so that we know what the information is. So let's start by creating a box plot. So our first example says we need to construct a box plot for the data below that represents the quiz scores in Mr. Stevenson's math class. So what we need to do first is go to Stat, Edit, clear any information that is in your list by hitting Up, Clear, Down. Then we are going to input all of this information in L1 because there is no frequency list. In other words, a list telling us that a given value occurred a certain number of times. Then we need to put all of this data into our L1, carefully double checking and keeping track as you go. Once you've done that, you can go to Stat, Calc, and then select choice 1, 1var stats. Then depending on your calculator, you may need to tell it that the data is in L1, or just make sure that your calculator says that the data is in L1. Hit enter, and then you will see all of this information come up, which is the mean, and it includes the standard deviation and other things that we'll talk about later. But none of those things are our statistical summary. So you need to scroll down so that you can see n equals 19 at the top. Below that, it should say minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and maximum. That is the 5-number statistical summary which we need to write down so that we can create our box plot. So off to the side, I've written down the minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and maximum. Now I also need to put the data points above those values on my number line. But my number line isn't labeled yet, so we need to start by figuring out what we need to count by. The best way to do that is to figure out how many lines you have and what the range of data is. In my example here, my range I can find by subtracting the maximum and minimum, so 98 minus 52 gives me 46, and then I can divide amongst the 15 line spaces that I have. That tells me, since the answer is 3.06 repeating, I need to count by at least 4, so I'm going to go ahead and count by 5. Once I have that data, I can go ahead and now plot my points above the minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and the maximum. Once you've done your best job with that, now you can go ahead and create the box in the middle. And then we go ahead and put a line through our median, dividing that rectangle into 2 smaller rectangles. And then we can use our minimum and maximum to show that those are the whiskers for that last part. So this goes from here to here, and from our minimum again to the box. And you can put a line here so that you can kind of really see that these are our minimum and our maximum values, and then that is the rectangular part showing where the Q1, median, and Q3 are. Then from here, we still need a title and a label on the bottom. So our label tells us what the data represents, which is quiz scores, and the title is what the whole thing is about, which is Mr. Stevenson's quiz scores. Then from there, we can go ahead and use that box plot to read this information. And we'll talk more about this in class.